Hello, my name is Jacob Cochran. I'm a career coach at the University of Northwestern, and you're tuning in here for part two of Explore Your Story, where I'm giving practical steps on how to choose a major, determine the callings God has on your life, maybe help you figure out how to pursue different career paths. And so we've got information in here for everyone, no matter where you're at, whether you're a PSEO student determining maybe a major or a alumni who is looking at changing their career. And we had part one, so if you haven't listened to that already, I encourage you to do so. But we're going to cover this, as far as this goes, we're going to cover the second part, explore career paths here in part two. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to email us at career@unwsp.edu. You can also set up appointments with us, and we highly encourage you to do so. But yeah, thank you for joining me. And we're going to start, though, with just a verse here to kind of inspire us a little bit. And this comes from 1 Corinthians 12. It says, "Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of service, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone." And so I just want to encourage you that all too often we look at other people's perceived success or other people's paths and we compare ourselves to theirs. And although it's okay to do that from an information finding place of just kind of doing some fact finding about different careers and different paths, God has a different plan for each of us and different activities and service and different gifts that he's given to each of us. So which is just so awesome and sometimes so frustrating as we're trying to figure those out. And so I definitely encourage you to explore and figure those things out. And the growth that you get from that is amazing. But just as a remembrance to stay grounded in that God is the ultimate the judge and the ultimate kind of layer of our path. And so we want to follow the different callings he has on our lives. So we're going to start, though, with talking about informational interviews. So really trying to give you some practical information that will help you as you are determining these important decisions and directions in your life. And informational interviews, if you haven't done them, but essentially it's when you meet up with someone either in person, virtually, or over the phone, and you ask them about their career and what they like, what they don't like, and I'll highlight some of that in a moment. But it's just a brief conversation, generally fairly informal. But one thing I want to impress upon you is to when you're doing informational interviews, is to remember that you are relationship building as well. It's not just all fact finding. It's not an Easter egg hunt of looking for that nugget, that egg, and that prize. It's you're having a conversation with a real person who you never know could become a really invaluable friend or mentor, especially if they're in the industry or at the company or in a role that's similar to yours or the same as yours down the line. And so you're developing these relationships. So I just want to remind you of that. There's, essentially you're networking, and networking is more about farming than it is hunting. And so just going to highlight what you can do, though, in these informational interviews. And then we'll talk briefly about where you can maybe find some people to do informational interviews with. But essentially, you're going to ask someone about their job. If we're searching for different majors and career paths, that's kind of the frame that we're coming from here. So what do they do? What do they like about what they do? What are the challenges with their job? Ask them about their career path, maybe about other jobs that they've seen, other roles that they've viewed, other career paths that they've seen, and other roles that they've had. Ask for advice. If they've already agreed to talk with you or to meet with you, they are a helpful person already. They've proven that. And so there's a good chance that they are willing to give you advice, and they maybe have really good advice. So ask them for advice on maybe different paths that you could take or pitfalls that you can avoid. But yeah, you're looking to really find out, depending on where you're in the process, different information. If you are early in your process, you're trying to figure out majors, you're just exploring all different options. And so just getting a feel for different careers and different industries and different companies. If you are at a point though where you're like, I'm pretty certain this is the role I want, and they're in a really similar role, or they're at a company I really want to work for, yeah, getting that specific advice from them, maybe even trying to do a job shadow with them, um, pardon me, so that you can get a better understanding of exactly what they do. And so I was mentioned, where do you find these people that you're going to do informational interviews with? First off, start with your friends and family. Like literally start asking your friends and family these types of questions. I had an instance not that long ago where at a family gathering, I started asking one of my uncles more about his job. And I was just amazed at how little I knew. His job is, he's got a very similar title to what he's had for the last 10 years or so. So I thought I knew, but it's evolved and he's doing a lot of different things than he was doing 10 years ago. And he's got different advice, for me than he had 10 years ago too. So there's just, yeah, and it was just really cool. It was a cool moment to just be connecting with my uncle and learning more about what he does. And not only was I learning from him, but I found out ways I could be praying for him and ways that, he's being challenged right now, and was even able to offer, some information that I had come across recently at that time. So definitely, it's just a great way to connect with friends and family. So I encourage you to do that. But then you can also ask your friends and family, hey, do you know anybody else I could connect with? Or, do you know somebody in this industry or in this type of role? And more often than not, that's the best way to grow your network and find people who are willing to talk to you. It's much more likely to have someone be willing to do an informational interview with you if they are connected to you in some way. If though you've exhausted your friends and family, and even if you haven't, I encourage you to go and maybe check out on LinkedIn people that you can meet up with or virtually meet up with to learn about their roles. And so LinkedIn's a great place to do that. I'm not going to go into it on this video, but you can check out other resources we have that show you how to go onto the University of Northwestern St. Paul's page and find alumni who are in roles or at companies that maybe would be great to hear from. So I encourage you to do that. LinkedIn is a great resource for that, especially if you've exhausted kind of your own leads. But even if you haven't, there's going to be, there's limitless connections out there via LinkedIn. I guess there is a limit, but there's millions of people to connect with. And then just practically speaking, if you haven't done this already, take a look at our specific resources that we have to offer. And I'm going to highlight just a couple of those briefly. But first off, make an appointment. So if you haven't already met with a career coach, please do. We can help you figure out where you're at in the process, what the next steps are, what you're going to need to do later on, so that you don't miss or avoid, avoid making any mistakes. We want you to avoid making any mistakes. So yeah, meet with us. And we also have resources like ONET that's available to the general public, but is put out by the Department of Labor, gives really good information about different careers and jobs that are out there. And we have Candid Career. That one we pay a subscription to. That one's got hundreds of videos for you to watch about different careers. And they're essentially informational interviews that have already been taped with very real people. That's one of my favorite things about that resource, is that the videos, they're very authentic feeling and real, and you get some really good information. We also have resources where you can look at the different majors. I encourage you to go through the course catalog just through the ROC and find out about different classes, compare different majors. But also we have resources on ours that show you, what can I do with this major? What jobs does a English major typically go into? What are some of the strategies for success with those types of majors, and compare those. And lastly, some different things that you can be doing is you can pray, definitely spend time in prayer and meditation. Think about your next steps. Don't get too hung up that you, like I said before, you maybe miss, next step and you get stuck in one spot. Weigh your options. I think a lot of people end up choosing something that they're familiar with. So explore your options and weigh them out. And then make sure you've got enough information. So this sample sheet right here is a resource that we have for comparing majors. And it's just an example of a decision um, analysis matrix. You can Google that and find out more about those, but they're really great tools for helping you make decisions. They don't make decisions for you, but they just, they're, I think, a level or two up from pros cons sheets, if that's something you've used before. But essentially, you rate different areas for each of your options, and then you can weight. This one doesn't have you weighting them, but you can weight them with a multiplier based off of how important they are. So maybe your interest in courses is really important, so you're going to multiply each of those numbers by 2. Anyways, I'm going into the weeds here, but essentially you're given a number at the end, and it helps you kind of weigh like, oh yeah, that does hit, even though it's a little lower in this area, it's really high in the areas that are important to me. So check that out, decision analysis matrix. Some practical next steps that you can take after listening to part 1 and part 2 here is you can take a personal assessment, you can talk with families and friends, you can conduct an informational interview, job shadow, volunteer. I didn't mention that yet, but you should consider volunteering in an area you're interested in, and then of course make an appointment with us. So yeah, if you haven't already, I encourage you to download Handshake. You can make an appointment. Otherwise, follow us on Instagram at Career Development, UNW Career Development. And you can always email us your questions at career@unwsp.edu. Or when we're back on campus, stop by in NAS Hall. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.